So, Sam, tell us where you're from.
Well, that's an interesting question. I was born and raised in Indianapolis in the Midwest, not Minneapolis, Indianapolis, where the Indianapolis 500 takes place. And I've never been to it, so that's interesting as well. But I moved a lot between Indianapolis and Southern California, South Orange County to be specific, from about 11 to 17, which those are two very, very different places. And I moved back and forth several times.
Okay. Why did you move back and forth several times?
Yeah, all right. Well, the short answer is my parents separated. My mother actually moved to Hawaii first. I spent some time in Hawaii, but didn't live there. And then she moved to Southern California. And I have a brother who's 7 years younger. So I'm the only girl and the oldest. And I think the real answer is I wanted time with both my parents. And sometimes it was for proactive reasons, and sometimes it was for just wanting to be closer with my family. So I moved, I took my brother, he stayed in Southern California, and then I went back and forth. And
Mm,
I ended up graduating early. I think it was a semester early from high school, ultimately in Indianapolis. But I
hmm.
went to middle school and high school, several different places in both states.
What was that like, ping-ponging back and forth in terms of making friends?
It was on one hand way harder than I thought it was going to be. When I first agreed to move to Southern California, I thought it was going to be really fun and easy. And
Mm,
I was also in middle school. I think because of just I knew I already had a skill in connecting with people, but it was harder than I thought. And there was some real mean girl stuff that started happening that surprised me. And there were some bigger culture shocks than I expected. But it was also a real blessing because it really,
mm,
really, really helped me learn some deeper skills around connection and boundaries and being able to go into new places and new work environments even. I mean, I see it in my career today that how I can kind of read rooms or read organizations and see where folks are. So as hard as it was, I'm really grateful for, including the separation with my parents. That was another hard thing
mm,
and hard on the family, but I learned a lot through that process. I was kind
mm,
of the go between with both of my parents. And
mm.
though that was hard, I think I learned a lot around negotiation and at a
Diplomacy.
very young age.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say that. So you're saying that you can walk into a new situation, and because you got so much practice going into new situations, it didn't cause you to retreat because you knew you had a natural talent to connect with people. You just honed that skill of being able to read a room.
I think so. I mean, I think that's accurate. I think that's a great summary. I think I also learned more about conflict and having a different opinion than others and
Mm,
um, how to, I mean, full transparency, I had someone who threatened to beat me up because she thought I was dating somebody, and I wasn't. But even that, I mean, I was so shocked by how she even thought I was dating someone and what that meant and why she was so angry with me and like worked through it.
mm, mm. Wow.
I mean, this is an eighth grade, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it
Yeah.
was, I had one moment where I'm like, I guess I could probably take her a little bit my street smarts. And I'm like, all right, I really love school. I don't want to get into like, this
Yeah.
is not something like, I do not want to be in a fight over this. This is ridiculous. Yeah. And there was also a lot of different diversity in Southern California compared to Indianapolis.
Mm,
But I also remember different who would kind of stand up for each other or take a stand in things. And I think that was another important, like a lot of people would just walk away or just want to watch what was going on. And I remember the few people who stayed and like were part of the conversation were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I think that really stayed with me. But it
mm.
matters to have an opinion. It matters to say your truth because it was some other people who I really didn't know that said, "I don't. How is this what you think has happened? That's not actually what's happened."
Mm.
It matters.
So I find myself listening to you thinking everything you know to do to be successful at work, you learned in eighth grade.
Yeah, I don't know if I realized that, but I think it's true. I don't know if I would just put it in eighth grade, but boy, did it certainly come to
Yeah,
a head at that
yeah.
point.
Mm,
I was activating all of the skills and tools that I had, and then some I didn't know I had, and then
Yeah.
learning some. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. That's right.
So when you and I first met, it was last summer. We were both at David Peterson's memorial service, who was a wonderful coach to me, and I think mentor to you. And I'm very grateful for him. So I just want to acknowledge him
Thank
again.
you. Ditto.
Um, and as we started to chat, you shared some of your personal story, not this part that you just shared, but some of your personal story around when you graduated from school and how you didn't go to college immediately out of high school. And
Yeah.
I found myself absolutely gobsmacked, intrigued. And I would love for you to share some of that story.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and certainly if there are any parts of it you want me to dig into, I'm happy to share. I think what I'll start with is um, probably like a lot of kids, I didn't realize that my story was really that different. You just live in your life in your world, and it wasn't till much later. And still to this day, sometimes I'll meet folks like you who will say, "Wait a second, there's something really different here." So the gist of it is. Uh, Let me kind of highlight a couple things. I'm very, very close with my mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother. She passed not too long ago. She was illiterate. I was always told by her and others in the family that she wasn't allowed to go to school. She was considered quote unquote a half breed. I never really understood what that meant, but I knew that was the case, and I think probably just assumed that was true of everyone, everyone's grandmas. I didn't know there was a real difference. It was much later in life that I started to understand what was going on. She grew up in the South picking tobacco and cotton. And actually, when my parents separated, I had already spent a lot of time with her, but when they separated, there were also several years and moments in that whole process I lived with her.
Mm.
So she was a very influential, important person in my life. I actually remember going to the grocery store with her, and she would pretend that she didn't have her glasses so that I could write the checks for her. So it was a whole thing that we actually never spoke about, but I knew what was going on because she was illiterate. So I would write the check, and she'd say, "Oh, thank you. Since I don't have my glasses, I'll just sign the check." And I think it was also a place where I got to feel adult and special. Like I was young writing a check, which felt really great. She, by the way, later in life, which has been hugely influential for me, in her 70s, learned to read.
Mm.
She claims that it was because of me that I took her to a library and said there was an adult literacy program. I don't actually remember being the one to do that, but that gives you a sense of our relationship. So, neither one of my parents nor my grandmother obviously had gone to college. Though education reading was very important and seen as an honor. I think I say all of that because school was always really important to me. And I think in particular, I don't know if it was like on a cellular level, but I really had this sense to not take it for granted, and not everybody gets to.
Mm.
And I think I'm very average intelligence, but boy, do I know I work hard. And I think it was a lot of um, just like a legacy and like wanting to stand on the shoulders of my family that I knew had worked hard, hadn't had a lot, but were really contributed to society in a lot of, I think, really great ways. My grandmother was one of the wisest people I
Mm.
knew, and would say some of the funniest things as well. So between all of that and then my parents separating, also we had a very humble life. So there was no college money. So there was always, the beauty in this is there was always a sense of you can do whatever you want. Like there was zero pressure of like, go be a doctor or go be a lawyer. But if you want to be, go do that. But you're going to have to be the one to do it. And sometimes that felt so deeply unfair to me. And boy, am I so glad that was the life that I had, because everything I did was a very conscious choice. So when I graduated from high school, I was very clear that I wasn't totally certain what I wanted to do. I was also very clear that college was very expensive and that I needed some time to figure out what I wanted to do. And I wanted some time to also be on my own. I graduated early. I right away started working in a nonprofit that worked with American Indians. And I thought, well, no better way to learn and decide what you want to do than start doing something and see what you like and what you don't like.
Mhm.
And I loved it. And I did some classes at community college because I thought, oh, I'll just get some of the basics done. I was very financially savvy about that. Never paid a dime. The state of California at the time would pay for, so I got some of that done. And then I got really clear what I wanted to do, and I applied to Berkeley. It was the only school, UC Berkeley was the only school I applied to. Everybody said I was crazy. Nobody gets into Berkeley. It was, they said, what if you don't get in? I said, well, look, I'm doing all the things I love to do. If I don't get into Berkeley, I'll look at other options, but I'm clear that's what I want. And I got in. And I think there's a clarity. There's a thread for me in all of this of being thoughtful and having clarity that has often worked that way in my life. And I also had a very different experience in college than most folks. My younger brother, who was a teenager, needed to live with me. So I had a teenage brother. I was like an auntie mom. And I was working full time at this point with Learning as Leadership. They basically do coaching, leadership development, and kind of OD work. I got to meet all kinds of amazing people that now it's shocking when I look back. Maxie Moltzby, as an example, who's the co-creator of Rational Behavioral Therapy. I could go on and on, but I got to meet and be trained with directly.
Wait, stop for a second. So,
pause.
So how old were you when you started college?
When I went to Berkeley, or when I started doing some classes
when you went to Berkeley? How old were you?
Okay, when I went to Berkeley, I was probably 21, 22.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Your storytelling is so compelling. I'm like, I just keep listening. I'm like, oh no, I need to ask some clarifying questions.
Do it.
So I was going to ask you, so who are some of the other people you met at this besides Maltz?
Oh yeah. Now you're gonna push on my being able to name drop. I'm the worst at name dropping.
Yeah, please do.
Please do. Who are some of the others? So I don't know. It's like you scared the name right out of me. Okay. MIT. Hold on, you're gonna help me. Known for OD. I think he's still at MIT.
Edgar Schein.
Well, that came later in when I went back to get my master's. But yes, but even oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to email you his name.
Okay,
all right. They would like go skiing with him, and he'd come over and talk about and we'll get to it, I think, later. But what also started to happen, in addition to in academia, the names that I got to work with were the leaders and the companies that I got to work with. So it was a double header for me of both in academia and then also the leaders of companies that I just never in a million years would have thought that I got to work with.
And how did you get that job?
Everything's like a funny, everything in my life is this not direct path. I was working for the Walking Shield American Indian Society, and there was a book written called Stone Soup for the World that was about people and organizations making a difference in the world. And Walking Shield was featured in it, and Learning as Leadership was featured in it. And I had just come back from a reservation in South Dakota, the Pine Ridge Reservation, and got a call from the executive director who said there's a book, like a publicity book event happening in LA. Would you be willing to drive up? And I said, well, I just got back. I'm really tired. He said, totally get it. Like, no pressure. And I woke up the next morning with some kind of weird feeling that I needed to go. I don't know how to explain this. And I went and I met some of the staff of Learning as Leadership. The founder of that organization was a child in hiding in the Holocaust. There was a whole kind of coming together of people and organizations making a difference in the world. And I remember them saying, wow, you are, I think I was 18, maybe 19 at the time. The work that you're doing, you have so much passion. It's clear. Also, it seems like you're going to burn yourself out really fast. And I just kind of froze because I don't think anybody had ever really seen that before. And I think it really struck me of like, maybe I was already starting to feel that way. And I was intrigued. And so I started researching what their methodology was and what they did. And I ended up working with them and kind of volunteering and being part of their process. And then I ultimately made a shift from nonprofit over to their company, which had started as a nonprofit, interestingly.
Mm,
And I stayed there a long time because I got
mm.
to meet and be with all of these people. I mean, a whole bunch of people at Harvard, Sue Ashford. I mean, we could go. I mean, there are books that I'll look at. I'll be like, oh, I've met them. I worked with.
Yeah.
Probably with my personality, I don't over fixate on like
Uh,
celebrities, but I'm often told names that I'm like, oh yeah, they were part of Learning as Leadership, or they came to Learning as Leadership. It's
yeah.
pretty
Oh,
humbling.
so good. Anything else about your college experience that you want to share before we jump to the present day?
I think the only thing I would say is in retrospect, I personally hope and wish more young people had kind of the experience that I had.
Mm,
Um, it is pretty shocking to me how we expect kids to go straight from high school to college and make some decisions at that level of what they want to do. Like, how would you know?
mhm,
So it seems like there is more openness to gap years, but I'm like, I don't even know if it's a gap year. It may need to be just a gap or some time.
mhm,
I hope that we are moving towards more thoughtfulness and space for that. I felt like I really had to advocate for myself. I had a lot of,
mhm,
I remember
mhm,
some teachers that I
mhm.
really liked in high school saying to me, we're really worried that you're not going to college right away. And I said, I'm not worried about it. I know that when I make a decision, I'll go. There was
Mhm.
really, yeah, a narrative or a story of if you don't go, you'll never
Oh,
go back. And
for
I felt a
sure.
lot of pressure and I was like, I
Yeah,
really think I will go.
yeah. I completely agree. I mean, I've thought a lot about this because when I graduated from high school, if you did not go to college immediately, it was as if you had fallen off the apple cart. Like
Yeah,
you weren't going to go to college,
that's
and you
right.
probably, and most people didn't. And I do think it's also changing. So our daughter, she graduated from high school, decided she wanted, she'd gotten into some really good colleges, but she decided she wanted to take a gap year. And then she decided she wanted to take another gap year. And, and then she decided to enroll in college, and now she's a junior and figuring it out, and she's 23, and it's fantastic
Mm,
because she has a different perspective. And so, to your point, I think it has shifted significantly,
yeah.
where we are saying, okay, so you don't go right now, and maybe you never go, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But
I think there's
the,
more acceptance even of that as well,
mhm,
for a
mhm,
lot of different reasons. And I think that's
yeah,
okay too.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay, so,
Education's important to me, but I think it also really, maybe thanks to my grandmother, it's like I both respect and covet it, and I don't think there's one way to be educated. So I
mhm,
think there's a lot in life and through other venues that are important or just as important that are part of
mhm,
education. I think it's also why I joke that every 10 years I get a degree. I didn't mean for that to happen, but I in my 20s, got that degree. Then in my 30s I was like, all right, I think I'm going to go back. I think there's something around leadership and organizational development I want to do a deeper dive into. And I was like, nope, I'm done. And then I, sure enough, went back into my 40s, and I'm probably 12 months at most away from a PhD.
congratulations. So,
Thank you.
what will your PhD be in?
Leadership and organizational development.
Fantastic.
Yep. So it's been
And
a thread throughout.
you're going part-time,
Well,
sort of,
yeah,
kind of.
yes, yes. It's kind of how I've done everything, like a little more than part-time, but certainly not full-time.
Uh-huh.
And I just finished, I go at my pace. That's the other lesson I've learned.
Mhm,
I don't,
mhm,
sometimes they'll be like, but if you took another class, nope, I'm going to go at my pace. Like I'm the slow, I'm the
mhm,
hare
mhm,
or the
mhm.
tortoise rather. I'm not the hare. And then I just finished mid-December my last PhD class. So all my coursework is done. So
Yeah.
now I'm in the dissertation process, IVR,
Wow.
all of that.
Wow. How exciting. Can you say what your dissertation's on, or is it confidential, highly secret?
Well, I mean, I need to get it approved, but my proposal that I'm working towards right now is around power dynamics, essentially, in the people function of
Mm.
companies.
Oh, 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 how exciting. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So more to come on that.
Congratulations.
But yes, I got to get
Congratulations.
it approved, but I think we're on to something.
Yeah. Okay, so jumping to the present moment,
Yeah.
talk to us about what does your day-to-day look like at Meta? So you oversee, my understanding is that you oversee a team of coaches, but what does that look like practically, and do you have to coach the coaches a bit?
Yeah. So, well, let me back up for just a second. My role, which is such an honor, is coaching is one part of it. So we also have a team of um, leadership development business partners. So essentially internal consultants, and the programmatic piece as well. So coaching is a piece of all of that. So it's kind of an end to end to support leaders and the org leaders. In the company, which is great. Do you want me to start with what my day looks like with all of that?
Yeah, just give us a little
Okay.
bit of the flavor just to get a feel.
I would say exciting, full on, lots of context switching. So it's and the reason being, with all the different teams and functions that I support, it's everything from meetings to I coach leaders as well, so that I can sometimes switch and then I'm in the coaching mode. Then I'm sometimes talking to our coaches about where we are with our strategy and how it's going with coaching, to certainly one-on-ones and supporting my team with like our strategy and looking to the future. And because I'm in tech, there are pings coming all the time with emails. And then my husband, we have our own private, he's also in tech, by the way, different tech company. He's a video game producer. We have a whole nother platform where then he tries to ping me when he has questions. And sometimes at the end of the day, I'll be like, why didn't you respond? And I'll just say, I can't keep track of all the pings coming in all the time. So exciting and full on, and sometimes maybe a little too much.
And what do you do, Sam, when things get to be too much? What's your, how do you manage that?
Yeah. Okay. Here,
The real answer.
maybe I'm overly honest about stuff. There's two go-to things I do. If I don't have a lot of time, I'm known to literally lie down on the floor for like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and just take a deep breath. I work at hybrid, so I have done it at work. I don't
Uh-huh.
do typically when I'm in the office. That's not what I do. I have done it though, I will be honest. And it's for me just a grounding and literally and figuratively take some deep breaths and just try to reset.
Hmm.
It helps. I think it's just calm the nervous system down and try to like parse through what do I need to do right now. My other favorite though is going for a walk.
Okay.
They're kind of similar, but I will and get out and if I can,
In
and usually
nature.
I can in California, get outside.
Mhm. Mhm. That's interesting. So walking is my go-to of like, in fact, before you and I got on this call, I was like sort of pacing back and forth just to get that, get that cortisol out of the system.
Yes.
But it had
Yeah.
never occurred to me to just lay down flat,
Yeah.
prone, and allow
Yes.
your body to just breathe. That's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Be still, thoughtful. Sometimes it's a meditation. Sometimes it is just
Mhm.
ground myself,
Mhm.
take a deep breath.
Mhm.
And I've done it with like a 10-second in between,
Yeah.
where
Okay.
I think I don't have time to go for a walk or that's going to add more stress. And yeah, it sends a signal pretty quickly to the body.
Really good. Okay.
You'll have to let me
So
know if you try it.
yeah, I'm curious. And of course there's always the go-tos of I go grab a Diet Coke or I go grab, a potato chip. I'm sure, we do those as well.
Yes.
But on our days that we're managing it well, it's the
Yes.
walk or the lay down.
Yes.
So does working and coaching no, actually not coaching. No, let me ask that a question. So does a nonprofit
Mm.
require a different style of leader as opposed to a place like Tesla?
It's a really great question. Yes and no is what I
Mhm.
would say. I know maybe that sounds like a cop out, but there are a lot of similarities. I think the places, and it also depends on what type of company, what type of
Mhm.
nonprofit. There are huge nonprofits, and different, of different um, pace and speed. I think what I personally have experienced is the biggest difference is around pace and scale.
Hmm.
Not, and I want to be very clear. Nonprofits can go very fast. They often have to, and certainly the ones that I was involved in, where it was humanitarian aid work on top of policy change. I mean, in many ways, I think that's where I could translate. Like, oh, I know how to be scrappy. I know how to like just grab what you can and go and just start making something happen. But I will say certainly the difference between nonprofits and just tech in general, so whether it's Tesla, Google, Meta, etc., is the scale. So you add speed and scale like that with like very innovative ideas. Yeah, it can feel like a rocket ship or an electric car taking off from, a Model S going from 0 to 60 and
I appreciate that distinction of thinking about speed can happen at a nonprofit or in a tech company like a Tesla. But the scale piece that's interesting to hear you say that the scale in, at least in the companies that you work in, is very different.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other piece is, for me, all of the places I've ever worked, there is a common thread of being mission driven. Now, we could all debate if everybody agrees with the mission, but for me personally, very consciously mission driven and missions that I believe in. But I do believe nonprofits generally, and certainly the nonprofits I was working in, that had a longer impact. Like the impact took longer to see sometimes.
Interesting.
Probably because of scale. I think that's how I got there. I could work just as hard or as fast and have the sense sometimes of, wow, I really wish we were seeing a bigger difference. But we're also talking, much smaller team, smaller amounts of money that you're trying to move around or impact. And I think that's the reason why. I mean, that was off the cuff what came up for me.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about being mission driven, and right now you work at Meta. And I think I would love to hear your thoughts because, when people think about this idea of mission driven, they typically, our brains go to, I work at a nonprofit. And yet I think that, in my experience anyway, you can be very mission driven. You can be very motivated by the work that you're doing in a for-profit company and feel like you're really doing good in the world. And so I would love to hear for you this perspective of, what mission are you on inside of Meta for you personally? What does that look like and feel like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've been very clear from a very young age. I want to say around 8th grade. So that is funny that was probably a pivotal year for me.
Clearly.
I want to make a difference in the world. And I think for a while, in my youth and immaturity and naivete, thought I knew what that meant and how it had to be done. And that was very much in the nonprofit sector. And I was pretty self-righteous about it, quite honestly, in retrospect. I think, for instance, the big aha I had as I went to learning as leadership was, they had been a nonprofit. The background of the founder, pretty compelling, had been through a lot, had her own lessons about all of that, and was not righteous, and really could have been quite righteous, and really wasn't. And they decided to become a corporation. And they felt like they could have a bigger impact and do more being a corporation than a nonprofit. And I remember that being the first perception buster for me of, oh, that's really interesting. And I think over time, what I started to see is I don't have a definitive, you have to be a nonprofit or a for-profit to make a difference. It really is, though, about what is the mission? What are you trying to do? And quite honestly, a lot of companies have a lot more impact on society and the world than nonprofits. I still have a love for nonprofits. I'm still involved with them. I wouldn't be surprised if I returned to one someday. It's not an either or for me, but I
Mhm.
started to get really clear as I worked with learning as leadership. And then I had access to even bigger companies, and quite honestly, companies I had a lot of judgment about, industries that I never thought I would be involved in. And as I was confronted with that, as I worked in those organizations, I started, of course, to see they're really amazing people who are doing the right thing and want to do the right thing. I also started to see, for instance, if I'm going to be mad about gasoline, but I drive a car with gasoline, I'm being really hypocritical. So better that you're working in industry and you're working with leaders who want to make a difference. And these corporations have a ton of power. And so
Mhm.
I think that was a big shift for me of, okay, then if you want to make a difference in the world, you're probably going to have to go into some places that you've had some judgment about,
Mm.
and be part of it being for good.
Mm. Do you
So
remember?
yeah. And for me, I never thought I would be in tech. I don't really know why, although I guess with my background, you could imagine that is a
Yeah.
big jump from like Midwestern background that I had helping to, get my brother into adulthood, et cetera, to being in some of these amazingly large and innovative companies. But it's been a real gift and honor. And I really do, I still say we with all of those companies, because I still
Mhm.
feel like there's contribution that I've made in all of them and still believe in. And it's all part of the world and technology we use. So
Mhm.
I at least I
Mhm.
get to be part of it. I'm not passive in it. And I don't think we all get it all right all the time. That's not what I'm saying either, but I want to be co-responsible for that.
Mm. It's interesting how, as we grow up and mature, the things that, we can be very, to use your word, righteous about when we're teenagers, and we start to navigate our way through the world, and we come up against our inconsistencies and our hypocrisies, and and also recognize that there are a lot of really, really good people in the world doing really good things in very unexpected places.
That's right. Well said.
Mm.
Well said.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, are you in contact with other folks doing the same work that you're doing at other organizations?
Absolutely. All the time. I think community of practice, especially in this kind of work, but I would say in all kinds of work, are important. I,
Mhm.
I think it's really important, maybe to the point we were just talking about, to not get insular, to
Mhm.
not think or there's one way to do it. I think that's really important.
Mm.
And it's
Mm.
thanks to connection with David Peterson and others. And as tragic and sad as it was, I mean, those kinds of communities are the places where I meet someone like you and
Mm.
others. And
Mhm.
it's a much more fulfilling life full of learning when it's expansive instead of constrictive.
Yeah. Mm. Interesting. I was just doing a live stream yesterday with Magda Mook, who runs the ICF, and someone posed the question of, like, how can you create, a better culture within the community of coaching? And she actually flipped it and said, how can we create a culture where we coach? And I just thought that was beautiful.
Yes.
Isn't that
Yes.
so good that
Plus
we're
100.
all the
Yes.
time thinking about, how do I create a situation and circumstances where I'm coaching other people?
Yes. And also in all areas. And
Mhm.
and also, how do I ensure that I'm coachable?
Oh, oh, oh. Okay, so here's one of the questions that I sometimes like to ask people when I'll say to them, so tell me what the last time you got feedback. And I say to
Mhm.
them, if you hear someone say to you, I don't know the last time I got feedback. I
Okay.
haven't gotten any feedback recently. Be very, very concerned,
Yes.
because it's likely that you haven't gotten feedback, not because you didn't need feedback, but because people feel like you won't hear it. And
That's right.
so when we start getting feedback from people of, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about that? That is a really good sign, because it means that you are in fact coachable.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Mm, mm.
I mean, that is, it's so important. And I agree that also if you're not getting feedback, you need to go proactively figure out why you're not getting
Yeah.
feedback. And that may be part of the feedback.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I think one of the other thing that I'll add, I'm curious what your take is on this. I think another component is I find it's really important to get regular feedback, so much so that in my family I'm known for not every night, but when we have dinner, doing kind of what's working, what's not working
Yeah.
around the table. Like what are you good at, what are you
Uh-huh.
developing, just to normalize it. And the reason that I say that is I find almost everyone has a level of understandable anxiety receiving feedback. And like most things in life, I think part of what makes it feel so big is not being in practice with it often.
Mhm.
The more I am giving and receiving feedback, the more it feels in service of learning and growth and not an indictment of who I am as a person. And I
Mhm.
find when you get away from it, and you're not giving or receiving it very often, it feels bigger and scarier than it needs to be. So I'm a big believer in be
Mhm.
in the practice of it. And I love metaphors. I probably overuse metaphors, but I think a lot about in sports in particular, having a coach is so important. And I always think of the Olympics in particular and
Yeah.
how they're giving constant feedback all the time and they want it and it's helping them excel. And then something is clear and useful as that like doesn't translate often into corporate America, and what a shame that is. To trust that when someone's giving you that feedback, it's actually to propel and excel you forward becomes much more. And I know some of the reasons why there's performance and all these other things that are, but there's still fundamentally, if we could have that frame of supporting each other and that
Mhm.
giving feedback or receiving feedback is really from a place of support and care. I mean,
Oh, for sure. In fact, something that I have thought about over the past couple of years, and I will say to people, when we first hired them and brand new, and I'm about to tell them, hey, X, Y, or Z, I will preface it with, for most people, giving feedback is really uncomfortable because you're
yeah,
afraid of, you won't like me, or you'll feel like I'm rejecting you, or it will just be awkward and uncomfortable. So, given that I just told you that, what that means is when I am about to tell you something that didn't work, that I want you to work on, this is me saying to you loud and clear, I am invested in you.
that's right.
I want you to be successful. I want you to be able to be here for a very long time. Because if I didn't care, I wouldn't tell you.
You know what's so beautiful about that? I couldn't agree more. I one time said to a leader who was leading me, if you don't give me developmental feedback, I won't trust you. And I'm just going to tell you that.
Oh, so
I know
good.
that about myself, that if you continue to say all the things I'm great at, thank you. I'm not saying stop doing that, but if you don't balance it with what I need to develop, I lose trust. There's something that doesn't feel rounded out or that you're being direct with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him saying, I've never had anybody say that to me. And I said, well, I don't even know if I've articulated it before, but I'm just being really honest
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I start to have doubt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good. All right. So in that spirit, what's some feedback that you've gotten recently? What's some coaching that
Yeah.
you've
Oh
gotten?
gosh. Do you what as a mother, as a wife, as a leader? I mean,
How
which
about
one do you want?
how about as a mother? Because those are always real
Okay.
gems. And then something at work too. So let's give us a personal or
Well,
professional.
okay. So as a mother, um, so Olivia is 14 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind with that age. And I mean, keep that in mind for all of us. Have
Mm-hmm.
empathy for all of us. Um, Olivia thinks that, and rightfully so, has given me feedback that I can be tense with work and like quick to frustrate. And she's absolutely right. And she also, um, the family can feel it. And I even
Ah.
can feel it. You know what? Like
So your
when
daughter
I'm
says
starting to
to
get
you,
tense.
okay, she says that you get, okay, fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
And so I think that's also where something I'm committed to practicing, and I don't always do it perfectly, is even what we were talking about in terms of um, going for a walk or
Mm-hmm.
lying down on the floor, I'm realizing how much I need to do that in the context switching of my personal and professional life. And all the more with this hybrid work environment,
Yeah.
where in some ways the beauty of working from home more is that we get more time together. The problem is sometimes we're all together in the same house, switching gear. Like I'm going down to get some sparkling water and Olivia has a quick question for me. She's come home from school and I'm in some other mode and just trying to get the water and go back upstairs. But this is the new world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
My husband also works from home. So we're all around more, but we're context switching as a family together. I don't say that as an excuse. It's just a new learning curve.
Yeah.
Of like how to switch these modes and which mode to be in. And I do think I was better at it when it was at work 5 days a week, but I would still say I'm not. It's still an area for development. It's still a way that I can be a little tense and have something on my mind. And then she's asking me a pretty minor question and my response isn't matching.
You're not there. Yeah. 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 Kids give the best feedback.
They really do. And she's really good at it. And direct, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so something at work.
Okay. So at work, the most recent feedback that I've been given that is I'm in deep reflection about, and it's really accurate and it feels really hard to make big change on, is that at times when I feel challenged, especially what I will call politically, I can tend to shrink. And I think what it is that my default is I start to go quiet. Partially because of pace being so fast. I think part of what I'm trying to do is observe, get my thoughts together. But I do think I'm overly safe sometimes. Like I think I'm staying there maybe a bit longer than I need to, should, could, in these moments. And I think it is because I always tell people this. I'm a not shy introvert. So I say that because I think sometimes people, they'll be like, oh, but you have no problem speaking up. I'm like, no, I don't have a problem. That's not the issue. I recharge. I need time to think. I introvert my thoughts. It can take me a moment, even several times with you. I've noticed I want to like pause for a moment. I take that's just how I'm wired. There's pros and cons to that, but I do think sometimes I take a little bit of a safer route. I go a little quiet, a little too long. There's probably a whole bunch of reasons for that. And I think the more complex and the bigger the org is that I'm leading, I think there's some places where I need to lean in faster and quicker with a point of view. I have one. I just think I got, and maybe be okay not having it fully baked or being totally clear myself. But it's noticeable. And I think it's absolutely accurate. And I think where I am in this company and the team that I have, it's highlighting it in a beautiful and hard way sometimes. But there's some places and environments where I could totally hide that, to be honest, but I'm like, oh, great. It's kind of like parenting, or you get into these contexts where it's like, I can't hide from this. It's going to push on this development area faster and harder.
Right. And because you are in coaching and you are in leadership development, when you get that feedback, it's incumbent upon you to model the behavior
100%.
of, okay, I need to receive this. I need to consider it. I need to
100%.
act on it.
100%. And I think most people would say, I hear it. I agree with it. I think where I'm feeling the most challenge, because that's not where I'm sensitive, I agree with it. It's been one of the harder ones for me to fast action on. I think in the past, and it's ironic with the point being that I need to go faster. I get that there's a whole irony in all of it. I hear it. I've said like in the moment, coach me, help me. And I've even in the moment had a leader, she knows who she is, and I really appreciate it, say, okay, tell us what you think, as a clear, like, and I stuttered. I did what I had a moment of like, but I just think I'm gonna have to keep practicing it.
And you have an opinion.
Yes, I do. I think I wrap myself, I think I'm overthinking. What I think is happening is I think I'm overthinking. I have an opinion, but I'm like second guessing myself. And I think I'm too worried that I'm going to say something that's going to piss somebody off. And what's
Mhm.
funny is I generally in life don't have an issue about pissing someone off. That's not,
Mhm.
I think as I get closer and more connected to people and systems, I get a little more careful about
Mhm.
it.
Mhm. 'Cause you're aware of the consequences.
Exactly. And I think
Yep,
all
you're
going
aware.
back to eighth grade and all
Yeah.
that, I'm doing
Yeah.
the dance of like, is this worth going in kind of
Uh-huh.
spicy or
Yeah.
do I, my
Do
husband
I
would
really
totally agree.
wanna fight that person over the boyfriend
Exactly.
or not? It
Exactly. And
all
I
comes
do
back to 8th
think
grade.
that's 100% right. And I think I just overthink.
Yeah. Mm.
And so I think what they're trying to do, and rightfully so, is see like just go a little, just like 1, 2 clicks faster, and don't let yourself churn so much.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and you brought up the sports metaphor earlier, and it's almost like the thought that came to me is just, quicken your reflexes. So,
Yes,
if you're catching the ball in 2
yes,
seconds, can you shave off, 10% on that? Because while it may not matter most of the time, there are some instances where it is required of you in your position as a leader to step in and to, as you said earlier, be in the practice of doing that so that when you need
yes,
to, you can.
yes.
Mm,
And
mm,
I think sometimes intellectually, I don't confuse, but I think in the moment I can confuse having a spicy or different point of view as not being collaborative. And so authenticity and collaboration are probably my two biggest values. So I think those values sometimes
yeah.
get into a dance with each other.
Yeah.
And I think they're just picking up me in that moment, kind of not sure what to do with it.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
I think you're right. I think it is. And again, using another sports analogy, it's like getting off. I was a swimmer, like getting off the block faster.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I
Mm,
think a little too much in my mind, and as an athlete, that can happen. And
right.
you're like, you don't
Just
want to
get off
jump
the
in
block.
too early. You don't want you're all these things, and then like you're missing. There's just
Mhm,
a space that you're missing, and so I
mm,
think,
mm.
yeah, I think that's and I
Whew,
think it's
so
totally
good.
accurate.
So, Sam, every website or every biography of yours on every website where we looked and researched it mentions the California coast. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I love the edges of everything. And I love the ocean, specifically the Pacific Ocean. So the edges of the Pacific Ocean. Um, and I think that's symbolic. And it's also the Pacific Ocean is powerful and deep. And it is a place that I often go to center is when I go on a walk
Mhm.
or when I need a vacation or a break, or it is often to be near water.
Mm,
And I love kind of everything related to water, everything
mm,
from swimming to surfing to just watching it,
mm.
quite honestly.
I took surf lessons for the first time over the Christmas break. It was so
What did you
fun.
think? Isn't it fun?
I loved it. And I had the most helpful, encouraging surf instructor. And it was, yeah, it was a great experience. I loved
Do
it.
we have time for me to tell you a quick little surfing
Oh,
story?
yes, please do.
Okay. Um, I love that you did that. I think everybody should try surfing at some point. There's a whole bunch of research about the value of it and impact on the body, etc., and being deeply present and connected to nature. But the first time I really surfed and I took a lesson, I was in Hawaii. What
Mhm.
a beautiful place to do that
Mhm.
in. And it was a young, probably 17 or 18-year-old local guy who was like, yeah, let's go. It's just what I wanted to do. Like knew where the waves were. I was like, teach me also like how are you choosing where you go, etc.
Mhm.
We go to the beach. He has me stand on the surfboard. He lifts up the nose of it. He's like, all right, we're good to go. And I'm going, wait. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I need a little more. He's like, no, we're good. Come on, let's go. And I said, okay, all right, let's go. So we go out there. He turns me around. He said, when I say stand up, stand up. I was like, all right. I'm thinking, I don't really know what I'm doing. So all this, and I mean, he paddle and stand up, but
Yeah.
about 20 seconds later, he yells, paddle and then jump up. So I do, and I stand up and I surf the wave and I turn around while I'm surfing the wave and I say to him, I don't think I'm on the right foot. And he screams back at me, who cares, you're surfing? And then I turned back around and like literally, I mean, the waves weren't that big, obviously, for me to be able to do, but I got up and other people were falling and I was like, wow, I actually stood up. But I was so focused on that I did it wrong. I
Mm.
paddle back to him and I'm like, okay, which foot? And he's like, young guy, he's like, this is really interesting. He's like, I mean, okay, you're right-handed. Okay, well, but you don't really need to like care about that much. But yeah, if you're right-handed, I would probably switch the way you did it, but you also got up, so who cares? Long story short, I keep paddling and keep trying it. I tried both feet, like switching feet, which one do I like better? And then at some point he just paddles over to me and he very calmly says, you know, you don't have to surf every wave, right? And I just said to him, I don't know how to explain this, but this whole experience has been deeply spiritual and very related to what I'm working on developmentally. And so I sat there for about 5 minutes letting waves pass, just thinking about how the whole day had been about, am I doing it right? And instead of enjoying the wave, I'm yelling back at him, wait, which foot am I supposed to be on? It was a really, really
Yeah.
beautiful
Mm.
experience.
How
It's
old were
probably why
you?
I love surfing
How
so
old were you
much.
when you did this?
Oh my gosh, in my 30s.
You did it for the first time in your 30s.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
early 30s.
Yeah. Mm.
I wish I'd done it sooner. I don't know why I really didn't. I focused more on competitive swimming, and then triathlons. I did a lot
Mm.
of triathlons in my 20s.
Mm.
But I wish I had I'd picked it up sooner. But
Yeah. All right. So speaking of surfing, is there a new S curve that you have jumped to recently, and how does it feel?
again, do you want personal or professional,
You
or
get to
does it
choose
matter?
whatever's coming to mind for you that feels relevant to our conversation.
Well, I mean, I will say, I mean, this is all about time, but I mean, parenting parenting right now, I'm in a new phase of parenting. There's some pretty challenging mental health
Mm.
things we're navigating. It's taking parenting to a new level. For me, parenting and leadership always have this interesting symbiotic relationship, though. I think I think what's familiar for me is there is a common thread of sometimes like just when I think I got it, I don't.
Mm.
I'm like, all right, I got this. Like I've done, like, okay, I know this kid, or I know this org, and then there'll be like a new complexity or new way that it shows up, whatever the it is that really pushes me to go, all right, I'm gonna have to really rethink how I do this, how I lead through this.
Mm.
And that kind of is similar both personally and professionally because you know, I've gone through layoffs before. I've led through them. I've led through really difficult other times throughout. But even what we've all gone through and what is very publicly known about Meta last year, there were some components that really kind of sucker punched me that just
Mm.
felt hard. And I feel similarly as a parent. I think as hard as that is, the beauty for me and the learning is that it just makes me really humble and it kind of reawakens the learning. I do feel like I'm someone who loves to learn, maybe too much so.
Mm. Mm.
My
Mm.
husband's like, I've never met anybody who needs to read as much or be in school as much as you are. Feedback taken as well there, but it's like a breaking wide open of learning. It's like a
Mm.
new, oh, maybe I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have been or could have been. And
Mm.
so yeah, I think I'm on just a new learning curve as a parent about what she really needs, how
Mm.
that may be different than what I needed at that age or what I need now, and how do I learn to show up in the way that she needs it. And I think that's really true as a leader as well. I think it's rooted in compassion.
Mhm.
I consider myself a compassionate person, but it's taking it to another level.
Mm. It's interesting what you said, where it's not necessarily that you're doing something new, it's that the situation or the nature of the relationship or the person that you're working with shifts. And so it pushes you into a new place or
That's right.
onto a new S curve in terms of how you engage with them and support them.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I am a bit of a junkie of like learning new things.
Mhm.
Whether it's surfing or riding a motorcycle
Mhm.
or horseback riding, all of that I love. And there is a lot of learning in it, but I'm really, really struck in this moment of my life how how things that you know or you thought you know, there's still so much to learn, and the
Mhm.
nuance of that.
Mhm.
It's something that I'm very struck by and paying a lot
Yeah.
of attention to.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I'm going to say this. We might edit this out, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
I think that it's been interesting for me because, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I went to therapy and I'm like, okay, good, learned a lot. This is great, etc. And thinking that, you sort of solved through a lot of things. Now let's just focus on, emotional regulation and self-awareness and mindfulness and all that good stuff. But not too long ago, some things came up and I was like, oh, I need to go back to therapy. Huh. Didn't see that one coming. I guess there's more that's unresolved that wasn't expected to be resolved. And now I'm in a different place and it's time to go back and revisit that again. And so that's what came to mind when you just said this of like, you might, you may go to therapy once or twice or 5 or 10 or 20 times
That's
because
right.
there's a cyclical nature to it and a spiral of improving and progressing, but you might have to go back and revisit some things. So that's what came to my mind when you just what you described.
That's precisely it, Whitney. Like, and I think that's true of coaching or parenting or leadership. I mean, why you can be in one role, or it's the same person, but we're all changing.
Mhm.
Everything's changing all the
Mhm.
time. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in complexity theory. You
Mm.
can't replicate a lot of this because we're all growing and learning. So what I learned and worked, with my daughter several years ago, she's a different person right
Yeah.
now. She's
Yeah.
evolved, and I have too.
Mhm.
So I can't just keep doing the same things and expecting the same
Right.
results. But I'm just finding that to be so true everywhere.
Yeah. Mm.
And I'm dumbfounded by it. There's just moments where I'm like, wow, okay, I thought like this, to your point, it was like, I kind of thought I tied this in a bow and I like
I
had
was
learned this. I'm
done
like,
with
but there's
that.
a new component of this. And similarly, like coaching therapy,
Yeah.
all I'm like, I think I'm going to have to go open this case back up.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm. So interesting. Um so just a few more questions and we'll wrap up. So,
Yep, you're
when
good.
someone comes to you for coaching and they're saying, "You know what? I want to be successful in this organization.
Mhm.
I want to accelerate my growth along this current S curve that I'm on." What is one thing that you find yourself saying, doing in those moments over and over again?
The first thing that comes to mind is why, and then why to that. So, what underpins that for me is the person needing to get very clear what is important to them and why,
Mhm.
and what the drivers of that are. And from that, generally clarity about what are the roadblocks, how
Mhm.
much of this is chasing performance, or it's
Mm.
I had to be my parents wanted me to be a certain way, and even though I have kids now, I'm still living a tape of I need to do this a certain way, or I'm chasing after a rating, or
Mhm.
it's I think it's a lot of work about our drivers
Mm.
and what
Mm.
do we really want. I don't think it's all of it, but I think there's a ton to dig in there.
Mm. So when they come to you for counsel on making progress moving forward, your question is, okay, define for me what making progress or moving forward
Yeah,
is. Like what's that metric of success that you're using? Then you go to the why, then you go to why some more, because then once you understand that, then you can support them as they're solving for making the
that's
progress
right.
in
And
that
then
area
I
that
think
you want.
that's exactly right. And then I think a really important follow-up question is then your development of success now still the same? Or do you want to change anything in that? As you've looked at that, do
Mm.
you want to edit or change? Like you get to decide that. I mean, to
Mm.
a certain extent.
Yeah.
But generally kind of similar to the sports analogy or the Olympics, I believe that coaching leaders at this level, they are successful. This is about, we're talking about like shaving seconds or nanoseconds and what it takes to get to that next phase. A lot of it, I think, is also like, hey, athlete, are you ready to tap in?
Hmm.
Do you want this?
Yeah.
Are you wanting to go faster? What and helping them be aware of that as well.
Mm.
So
Mm.
again, trying to go back to that metaphor. That for me is often what I'm thinking about.
Mm.
Because I just think it's so easy in these in the world we live in today, in these big companies, to just do it because. And I think a huge driver or motivator is coming back to
Why?
your own why. And then from there, we can decide, is the why the confusion, or is there really something else that needs to be worked on?
Yeah.
But I have to say, there's a lot in that why that can get worked through.
All right, last two questions. What's been useful for you in this conversation? And it's a bit of a meta question, which
Pun
is
intended.
absolutely, which is it's something that you observed that occurred to you that happened because we were having a conversation.
Actually, several things, but keeping it big picture, just the importance of time to reflect and really synthesize career and life experiences. I'm a big believer we are holistic human beings and they are woven together tightly, but it has been a while since I've thought about it, maybe because I'm further away from 8th grade and all the other things that I've talked about. It's been a while since I've made that connection, and it was something that really struck me when we met. And it felt serendipitous with the connection we both had with David Peterson as well. Yeah. I remember feeling that. So being reconnected with that, and just connection with you, connection with humans, and kind of how small the world is in many ways. I'm always kind of in awe of that, actually. And then I don't know if I'm allowed to ask, but it's the nature of who I am. I'm curious for you how you'd answer the same question.
I think what's been useful for me is your resilience and observing how you move and have moved throughout your life and found yourself in a number of situations that were not easy. And yet there's something, I think, innate to who you are, but then you've worked very hard to develop it, to be open and optimistic and embracing and cheerful about what comes your way. I think that's what's been most useful for me, is to listen to you and observe that.
Wow. Well, A, thank you. B,
you're welcome.
Your ability to ask really insightful, interesting, thought-provoking questions, it's a real skill. And then synthesize what you're hearing. Not a lot of people can do both, let alone one. And I felt that when we met. I mean, this is only our second time meeting.
Yeah.
And not to be presumptuous, but it feels there's a friendship or a connection that I feel. And I think a lot of it, I remember not knowing your background, etc. I remember feeling that when we met. Yeah. So I really appreciate it.
So there needs to be a third time. All right.
Sam, I agree with that.
Any final thoughts to put a bow on the conversation?
Just a lot of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation and making this happen.
Yeah. So fun.